Hey everyone. I'm sure you've heard all this talk about China's economy lately and how wild it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a real head scratcher, right? Like, on the one hand, you've got experts saying it's totally about to crash and burn like a real estate bubble that's going to burst any second.
Uh-huh.
And young people can't find jobs and prices are actually going down, which sounds good, but is actually a really bad sign for an economy.
Right. It can be a really big problem,
But
actually.
then at the same time, their stock market is suddenly like through the roof.
Yeah, almost 20% in the last month. It's crazy.
So what's the deal?
Well, it's complicated.
Well, that is what we are going to dive into today. We are going to try to unpack all of this stuff using this awesome video we found by Graham Stephen.
Yeah, it's called WTF Just Happened to China's Economy.
And we'll uncover some pretty crazy stuff like how this company, Evergrande,
Oh, yeah, Evergrande.
it's actually China's second biggest property developer,
Shit.
went bankrupt, owing like $300 billion.
Yeah, with a B.
Wild.
Yeah.
We'll also look at why so many young people are buying lottery tickets in China like it's going out of style.
Well, they kind of feel like winning the lottery is their only way to have a good future.
It's tough out there.
Uh-huh.
And to help us figure all this out, we have our expert here to break it all down. Not just what's happening, but what it all means for China, for the world, maybe even for you. So let's start with this big question. How can the stock market be doing so well when everything else seems to be a mess? What's the story with this whole economic roller coaster?
So to really get it, we need to go way back, back in time a few decades.
Okay.
China was a totally different place back then, lots of poverty. But then in 1979, things started to change.
Oh, yeah. What happened?
They made a big decision to open up to the global economy.
So they're like, hey, world, let's do business.
Exactly. And then later, they joined the World Trade Organization in 2001.
Huh?
And that really supercharged their economy. It was like they went from 0 to 60 in a few years.
Wow, that's fast.
It was unbelievable. They went from being one of the poorest countries to a global superpower, like the biggest exporter in the world in just a few decades.
Crazy, right? Yeah. It does sound almost too good to be true. I mean, did they really just transform that fast without any problems?
Well, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. There were definitely some issues brewing under the surface.
Like what? What kinds of issues?
Well, even back then, people were saying that China wasn't exactly playing by the rules,
Uh-oh.
like manipulating their currency to make their stuff cheaper than everyone else's,
Interesting.
and giving government money to companies that weren't actually doing that well, like they were propping them up artificially.
So it wasn't all real growth, huh?
Yeah, it's kind of like they were building a house of cards. It looks impressive for a while, but it's not going to last forever.
And now all those shortcuts are coming back to bite them now that their economy is slowing down.
Exactly. The cracks are starting to show, and one of the biggest cracks is in their real estate market.
Oh, yeah, that's what I've been hearing about. It sounds insane.
It was totally out of control for a while there.
Like, what kind of crazy stuff was happening?
Imagine people buying apartments that haven't even been built yet.
What?
Yeah, and like having to enter lotteries just for the chance to buy an apartment. And prices were going up like crazy. In some places, prices increased by like 700% in 16 years.
Wow. That is nuts. So this is what they call a real estate bubble, right?
Yeah.
Is it kind of like when everyone rushes to buy something and the price keeps going up and up even though it's not really worth that much?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's like a game of musical chairs.
Okay.
Everyone's trying to grab a seat before the music stops, but when it does, someone's left standing without a chair. And in the real estate bubble, that means people end up owning property that's worth way less than what they paid for it.
Oof, that's gotta hurt.
And in China, it's a huge problem because, like, for a lot of people, 70% of their wealth is tied up in their homes.
Wow, that's a lot of eggs in one basket. So when the bubble pops, it's like a chain reaction hitting the whole economy.
Exactly. And the government tried to step in and cool things down.
And what happened?
It kind of backfired. They tried to slow things down, but it just freaked everyone out. Developers started to panic because they had borrowed so much money to build all these apartments. And when the market slowed down, they couldn't pay back their loans.
Yikes. So it's like a domino effect.
Yep, one thing leads to another. And then you have Evergrande
Oh, yeah, that company we talked about earlier.
with the $300 billion debt.
That was a huge wake-up call, wasn't it?
Totally. It showed that the whole real estate sector was in deep trouble, and Evergrande wasn't the only one. Tons of other developers went bankrupt, too. It's a mess.
So we've got this real estate time bomb waiting to explode. And then on top of that, you've got all these young people struggling to find jobs. It seems crazy because China spent so much money on education. But now there aren't enough jobs to go around.
Yeah, it's a big problem. Officially, youth unemployment is almost 19%, but a lot of experts think it's even higher than that.
Wow.
And it hurts the entire economy when a big chunk of the population can't find work. They can't buy stuff, businesses suffer, and it just makes the whole situation worse.
Makes sense. So what's causing all this unemployment? Is it just the economy slowing down, or is there something else going on?
Well, the slowdown is definitely a big part of it.
Hmm.
Companies don't want to hire new people when they don't know what the future holds. But it's also a problem with the way things are set up.
What do you mean?
Well, China's education system expanded super fast, like they were producing tons of graduates every year, but the job market couldn't keep up. So now you have all these qualified young people, but not enough jobs for them.
Oh, so it's like a mismatch between what people are trained for and the jobs that are actually available.
Exactly. It's super frustrating for young people who've spent years and tons of money on their education only to graduate and find out there's nothing for them.
Yeah, I bet. And then there's that weird labor law in China, right? The one where it's really expensive to fire someone.
Yeah, that doesn't help either.
Like, how does that work?
Well, if you want to fire someone, you have to give them 30 days notice plus 2 months salary.
Seriously.
Yeah. So companies are super hesitant to hire anyone new, even if they need them. They're worried they might have to fire them later and it'll cost them a fortune. It makes things really tough for young people trying to break into the job market.
Wow, that is a tough situation. No wonder so many of them are turning to the lottery.
Yeah, lottery ticket sales have gone up like 50% recently.
It's like they're desperate for a way out.
Yeah. They're losing faith in the traditional ways to get ahead. They want a quick fix, a way to escape the economic mess. And that actually brings us to another big problem in China. Deflation.
Deflation.
Yeah.
That's when prices go down, right? Like things get cheaper.
Right.
That sounds like a good thing.
I know it might seem good at first, like who doesn't want to pay less for stuff?
Exactly.
But deflation can actually wreck an economy.
Really? How?
Well, when prices are going down, people tend to wait to buy things. They figure, hey, it'll be even cheaper next month.
That makes sense.
So no one's buying anything, which means businesses aren't making any money and the whole economy just slows down even more.
So it's like a vicious cycle. Falling prices lead to fear, which leads to even more economic problems.
Exactly. And in China, it's even weirder because they're experiencing deflation even though people's incomes are going up.
What? So people have more money, but they're still not spending it.
Right. They're too scared to spend because they don't know what's going to happen. They're just hoarding cash, which makes the problem worse.
Wow, so it's almost like a psychological thing.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of fear and uncertainty in the air right now. And that leads us to how China is trying to deal with all of this, what they're calling the Bazooka stimulus.
Oh, yeah. That sounds pretty intense.
It is.
So what is it? What are they actually doing?
Well, basically, they're throwing a ton of money at the problem, trying to boost confidence and get the economy moving again.
Okay, but how?
Well, they're doing a bunch of things, like cutting interest rates to make it easier for people to borrow money. And they're trying to get the real estate market going again. It's a big gamble. We'll have to see if it works.
This is fascinating. We'll dig into all the specifics of this Bazooka stimulus after a quick break. Stay tuned. So we were talking about China throwing a ton of money at their economic problems with this Bazooka stimulus.
Right. It's a pretty wild plan.
So what exactly are they doing? Fill us in.
Well, it's basically like they're flooding the economy with cash, hoping that'll jumpstart things.
Interesting. But isn't that the opposite of what a lot of other countries are doing? Like here in the U.S., everyone's talking about raising interest rates to fight inflation.
Yeah, it's definitely a different approach. A lot of Western countries are trying to slow their economies down to control inflation. But China's doing the opposite. They're cutting interest rates to make it cheaper for people to borrow money and hopefully encourage them to spend more.
So it's like they're hitting the gas while everyone else is slamming on the brakes.
Pretty much. But remember, we were talking about how China was trying to cool down the real estate market before.
Yeah, they had that whole homes are for living, not for speculation thing going on.
Right. But now they're encouraging people to buy more homes. It seems a little contradictory, don't you think?
It's like a total 180. So are they just delaying the inevitable? Is this Bazooka stimulus actually working, or are they just buying themselves a little more time?
That's the big question. It's too soon to say for sure. The stock market seems to like it, at least for now.
Yeah, we saw that big surge.
Right. But the real test is whether this actually translates into real economic growth. Will businesses actually start hiring again? Will people start spending more money? That's what I need to watch.
So it's a wait-and-see game. But this isn't just a game for China, is it?
Nope. The whole world is watching to see what happens.
Because what happens in China affects everyone.
Exactly. Their economy is like this giant cog in the global machine. If it breaks down, it's going to cause problems everywhere.
So how does all of this actually impact people like our listeners? What does it mean for us here on the ground?
Well, for one thing, if China's economy slows down, it could affect businesses and jobs here in the U.S.
Really?
Think about it. Companies that sell their products to China or rely on parts from China, they could all be affected if China's not buying as much stuff anymore.
That makes sense. And what about investments? I mean, China's a big part of the global market, right? Should people be worried about their investments?
Well, I'm not a financial advisor, so I can't really give investment advice.
Of course.
But what's happening in China does show how important it is to understand what's going on in the world and how it can affect your money.
So stay informed.
Definitely. And talk to a financial expert who can help you make the best decisions for your situation.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Now, before we move on from China, I want to circle back to something we talked about before. All the problems young people are facing over there
Yeah, it's a tough situation.
with the crazy high youth unemployment and everything.
Yeah,
It's kind of a bleak picture, isn't it?
it is. And it's not just an economic problem either. It can lead to social and political problems too. When a whole generation feels like they have no future, it can cause a lot of unrest.
Wow, that's a scary thought. So is China facing something even bigger than just an economic crisis?
It's definitely possible. Everything's connected. Economics, politics, society, it all plays a part. A crisis in one area can easily spill over into other areas.
So where does that leave us? Should we be worried, hopeful, or just completely confused?
Well, I wouldn't say confused. It's a complicated situation, but if we look at it closely and understand how we got here, we can start to make sense of it.
Okay, so how worried should we be?
It's important to be realistic. There are some serious challenges ahead for China. The real estate bubble is still a big risk, youth unemployment isn't going away anytime soon, and deflation is really hard to fix. Plus, we don't even know the whole picture because China's government doesn't always tell us everything that's going on.
So there are some red flags. But you're saying there's also reason for hope.
Right. Despite all these problems, China has a history of bouncing back. They've faced tough times before and always figured out a way to pull through. They've got a lot of smart people, a strong manufacturing base, and a government that's not afraid to take action.
So it's not all doom and gloom. What should we do? Just wait and see what happens.
Well, we can do more than just sit around and watch. We can use this situation to learn and prepare ourselves.
What do you mean?
Well, we can think about our own finances, make sure we're not taking on too much risk, and we can learn more about what's going on in the global economy so we're not caught off guard if things change.
So be proactive.
Right.
Don't just bury our heads in the sand.
Exactly. The more we understand about what's happening in the world, the better decisions we can make for ourselves and our families.
I like that. So you're saying this situation in China could actually present some opportunities.
Maybe, for example, if China's economy slows down a lot, it could create opportunities for other countries to step in.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like maybe some manufacturing will move to the other parts of the world.
So new players could emerge.
Potentially. And China might have to become even more innovative to find new ways to grow their economy.
So maybe some good could come out of all this.
It's possible. Like they say, necessity is the mother of invention. Sometimes you have to face a crisis to come up with new solutions. And for people who are paying attention, there could be some interesting investment opportunities too.
Ooh, that's intriguing.
But remember, I'm not giving investment advice.
Of course, of course.
The main takeaway here is that things are changing fast and we need to be adaptable. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Stay informed and be ready to adjust your plans as needed.
Great advice. Knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
The more we understand, the better decisions we can make.
Exactly. And it's not just about passively listening to experts like me. It's about being curious, asking questions, and trying to see things from different perspectives.
Yes. Engage with the world. Don't just let it happen to you.
I like that.
All right, well, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into China's economic roller coaster. So we've talked about a lot today. China's economy slowing down and what that could mean for the whole world. And we even talked about what people like our listeners can do to stay ahead of the game. But before we go, I want to leave you with one last thought. We talked a lot about all the uncertainty around China's economy.
Right.
And how that can make us all feel a little uneasy.
Yeah, it can be a little nerve-wracking for sure, but uncertainty is just part of life.
True.
It's always there. It's how we deal with it that matters.
So instead of freaking out about it, we should look at it as like a challenge.
Exactly. An opportunity to learn and grow, to
Sure.
become more resilient, not just with our money, but in every part of our lives.
Don't just sit around and wait to see what happens.
Right. Take charge. Stay informed about what's happening in the world. Keep your finances in good shape. And remember that even when things are tough, there's always a chance to come out stronger on the other side.
I love that. So before we wrap up, what's like the one most important piece of advice you would give our listeners as they try to figure out this crazy world we live in?
Be curious. Never stop asking questions and challenging what you think you know. And try to see things from different angles. The more you learn, the better prepared you'll be to make good decisions, not just about money, but about everything.
That's such good advice. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into China's wild economic ride. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep diving deep.